The scent of freshly cut grass and blooming hydrangeas usually brought a sense of calm to Officer Ben Carter. It was a rare Saturday morning and he was off duty, attempting to wrestle with a stubborn lawnmower that seemed to have a personal vendetta against his peace of mind. He wore faded jeans, a well-worn t-shirt and a baseball cap pulled low, a deliberate disguise from the crisp uniform and serious demeanor he donned 5 days a week. His new house in the quiet suburban development of Willow Creek was supposed to be his sanctuary, a place where the chaos of the city streets couldn't reach him. Willow Creek was known for its meticulously maintained lawns, uniform house colors, and strict homeowners association, the infamous HOA. Ben had read through the bylaws, a hefty document that felt more like a legal treatise than a guide to community living, but he figured as long as his lawn was green and his trash cans were out of sight, he'd be fine. He'd been so wrong. His first run-in with the HOA had been a passive-aggressive note about the shade of his mailbox. Then came the stern email about a rogue dandelion. He'd learned quickly that the HOA wasn't just a group of concerned neighbors, it was an entity, a looming shadow in the otherwise sunny community, largely controlled by one woman, Penelope Albright. Penelope, or HOA Karen as the younger residents secretly called her, was a woman in her late 50s with a perfectly coiffed blonde bob, an eagle eye for perceived infractions, and a voice that could curdle milk. She lived 2 streets over, but her presence was felt everywhere. Ben had only ever seen her from a distance, usually scrutinizing someone's overgrown rose bushes or measuring the height of a fence. He finally got the lawnmower sputtering to life, the roar momentarily drowning out the chirping birds. He pushed it across his front yard, the smell of gasoline and cut grass filling the air, a small victory in his battle for domestic tranquility. He was halfway done when he noticed a shadow fall over his pristine lawn. "Mr. Carter, is it?" The voice was sharp, cutting through the whir of the mower. Ben turned off the engine, pulling off his ear protection. Standing at the edge of his lawn, hands on her hips, was Penelope Albright. She was dressed in a tailored pastel suit, looking as if she were attending a board meeting, not inspecting yards on a Saturday. "Officer Carter, actually," Ben corrected, a hint of his professional tone creeping into his voice, though he still kept his cap low. He hadn't bothered to introduce himself to the HOA in his official capacity, preferring to keep his home life separate. Penelope's eyebrows, meticulously plucked, arched. "Officer, how quaint. Nonetheless, Officer Carter, we have an issue." Ben braced himself. "And what issue would that be, Ms. Albright?" She gestured dramatically towards his porch. "Your potted petunias, they are a vibrant fuchsia. Section 4, subsection B, Article 7 of the Willow Creek HOA Covenants and Restrictions clearly states that all exterior flora visible from the street must adhere to a muted natural palette. Fuchsia, Officer Carter, is anything but muted." Ben stared at his petunias. They were indeed a vibrant, cheerful fuchsia. He'd bought them because they made him smile. "They're just flowers, Ms. Albright." "Just flowers that are in direct violation of our community standards," she retorted, her voice rising. "This is a master plan community, Officer Carter, not a botanical free-for-all. I'll expect them removed by sundown." Ben sighed, running a hand through his hair. "With all due respect, Ms. Albright, I think that's a bit excessive. I'll consider it." "Consider it?" Her face flushed. "There is nothing to consider. This isn't a suggestion, it's a directive. And while we're on the subject, your fence is half an inch above the approved height, and I saw a child's bicycle left unattended in your driveway yesterday for a full 12 minutes. These are all documented." He grit his teeth. "I appreciate your diligence, Ms. Albright, but I'm off duty. I'd prefer to enjoy my Saturday." "Diligence is what keeps this community pristine, Officer Carter," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Some of us take pride in our property values." She gave him a condescending nod and then, to his relief, turned and walked away. Ben shook his head, fired up the mower, and tried to forget about the fuchsia petunias. The breach. The next morning, Sunday, was Ben's sanctuary. He woke up late, made a strong cup of coffee, and settled into his favorite armchair with a stack of forensic journals. The sun streamed through the living room window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. His German shepherd Rex, a retired K9 who now enjoyed a life of pampered naps, lay snoring softly by his feet. It was perfect. Suddenly, Rex's ears perked up. A low growl rumbled in his chest and he lifted his head, staring intently at the kitchen door. Ben frowned. Rex usually only reacted like that to unfamiliar sounds or suspicious activity. Then he heard it, a distinct creak from inside his kitchen, followed by a light clinking sound. His heart hammered. He lived alone and he hadn't left the kitchen door open. He grabbed his service weapon, which he kept holstered on a bedside table even when off duty, and moved silently towards the kitchen, Rex padding softly beside him, a silent, furry shadow. He pushed the door open, his weapon raised, adrenaline surging through his veins. Standing in his kitchen, completely oblivious to the fact that she was trespassing, was Penelope Albright. She was holding a small, silver measuring tape, meticulously checking the height of his kitchen cabinets. On his counter, next to his coffee maker, lay a notepad and a pen. Her back was to him. She hummed a tuneless melody, entirely absorbed in her unauthorized inspection. Ben's mind reeled. She had entered his house without permission. In uniform, he would have been furious. Out of uniform, in his own home, he was incandescent. "What in the actual hell are you doing in my house?" Ben's voice was a low, dangerous growl, echoing in the sudden silence of the kitchen. Penelope shrieked, dropping the measuring tape with a clang. She spun around, her face draining of color as she saw Ben, weapon raised, and Rex, teeth bared in a silent snarl, standing protectively by his side. "Officer Carter," she gasped, clutching her chest. "You nearly gave me a heart attack, and that brute of a dog, is he safe?" "He's safe for me," Ben said, his voice laced with venom. "You, on the other hand, are trespassing in my private residence. I asked you what you're doing in my house." She stammered, recovering some of her usual hauteur. I was merely conducting an interior assessment. Your window treatments, Officer Carter, are not in compliance with our uniform visibility clause, and I've received reports that your kitchen sink, when viewed from your side window, sometimes has unwashed dishes in it, which lowers neighborhood aesthetic standards." Ben stared at her, utterly dumbfounded. "You broke into my house to check my window treatments and my dishes." "I did break in," she insisted, her voice rising in pitch. "The back door was unlocked, clearly an oversight on your part, Officer Carter, and as an HOA board member I have a right to ensure compliance, both interior and exterior, for the betterment of the community. It's in the bylaws." "Show me the bylaw, Ms. Albright," Ben said, his voice dangerously calm. "Show me the section that says you can enter a resident's home without their consent, without notice, to conduct an interior assessment. Because I'm pretty sure that's called breaking and entering, and it's a felony." Penelope's face went from pale to a mottled red. "You wouldn't dare. I am a pillar of this community. I volunteer countless hours. My husband is a city councilman." "Your husband's job doesn't give you immunity from the law, Ms. Albright," Ben said, slowly lowering his weapon but keeping it firmly in his grip. Rex remained tense, growling softly. "I'm a police officer, and right now you are standing in my house having committed a crime." "The arrest." He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. "I'm calling this in, Ms. Albright, and since I'm a peace officer and this is my residence, I'm making a citizen's arrest." Her eyes widened in horror. An arrest? This is absurd. I demand you let me go at once. You can't arrest me for upholding community standards." "I can, and I will," Ben replied, his voice firm. He spoke into the phone, giving his address and reporting a trespasser. He deliberately used his full name and badge number, ensuring that the responding officers knew he wasn't just a regular civilian. Within minutes, the distant wail of sirens grew louder. Penelope paced frantically, her perfectly coiffed hair beginning to frizz. "This is a misunderstanding, Officer Carter. I'll forgive the petunias, I'll even ignore the bicycle." "It's too late for that, Ms. Albright," Ben said, watching as two patrol cars pulled up outside his house. He knew the officers who emerged, Miller and Rodriguez. Good guys, they'd follow procedure. Ben met them at the door, Rex calmly by his side. "Officers, thanks for coming. I've got a trespasser here, Penelope Albright. She entered my home without consent." Miller, a younger officer, looked confused. "Ms. Albright, as in the HOA president?" "The one and only," Ben confirmed. "And this is Officer Carter, my residence. She just got caught rummaging through my kitchen." Rodriguez, older and more experienced, took one look at Ben's serious face and the distraught Penelope and understood immediately. "Ma'am, is that true? Did you enter Officer Carter's home without permission?" Penelope burst into tears. "The door was open. I was only trying to help. His window treatments are dreadful, and the unwashed dishes, it's for the good of the community." Ben stepped forward, holding out his hand. She admits to entering my home uninvited to conduct an inspection of my personal property. That's breaking and entering and also criminal trespass. I want to press charges." Miller and Rodriguez exchanged glances. This was going to be a messy one. Arresting the HOA president, especially in her own neighborhood, was always a headache. But Ben was a fellow officer and he was clearly in his rights. "Ma'am, you're going to have to come with us," Rodriguez said, his voice firm but professional. Penelope's mouth dropped open. You can't be serious. This is a disgrace. My husband will have your badges." "You have the right to remain silent," Miller began, pulling out his notepad. As they led a still protesting, red-faced Penelope out of his house, Ben felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. He watched as she was placed in the back of the patrol car, her pastel suit a stark contrast to the dark interior. The neighborhood curtains were twitching. Whispers would undoubtedly spread like wildfire. He walked back into his kitchen, the silence feeling heavier now. Rex nudged his hand, a soft whine escaping him. Ben knelt, stroking the dog's head. "Good boy, Rex, good boy." He closed and locked his back door, then double-checked all the other windows and doors. The sense of violation lingered. He had always taken pride in his home being a safe haven, a place where he could drop his guard. Penelope Albright had shattered that illusion. He looked at his fuchsia petunias through the living room window. They seemed to mock him, cheerful and defiant. He decided they were staying, all of them, and he'd add some vibrant purple ones next week just for good measure. The phone rang a few hours later. It was Captain Evans, his precinct commander. "Carter," the captain's voice was weary. "Care to explain why the HOA president is currently being booked at the station for breaking and entering your home?" Ben recounted the events, sticking to the facts. "She confessed to entering my home without consent, Captain, to inspect my window treatments and my dishes. I witnessed it and I'm pressing charges." There was a long silence on the other end. "Look, Ben, I understand your frustration with the HOA, but Penelope Albright, she's well connected." "Captain, she broke the law," Ben insisted. "It doesn't matter who her husband is. My home was violated. What kind of officer would I be if I let that slide?" Captain Evans sighed. "You're right, Ben. Legally, you're entirely within your rights. And frankly, this might be a good lesson for the Willow Creek HOA. They've been getting a little too big for their britches lately. Just prepare for some fallout. This isn't going to be quiet." "Understood, Captain," Ben said, rubbing his temples. "But my house is my castle, and nobody gets to invade my castle without consequences." The resolution. The fallout was indeed swift and dramatic. The story of Penelope Albright's arrest for trespassing at Officer Carter's home dominated the Willow Creek online forums. Initially, many residents sided with Penelope, decrying Ben as a heavy-handed newcomer. But as details emerged, specifically, the fact that she had admitted to breaking into his house to inspect his dishes, public opinion began to shift. Other residents, emboldened by Ben's stand, started sharing their own stories of HOA overreach and Penelope's tyrannical reign. Within a week, an emergency HOA meeting was called. Ben, now back in uniform, attended. The room was packed, the air thick with tension. Penelope, out on bail, sat stony-faced, flanked by her husband, the city councilman, who looked furious. Ben stood up to address the room, his uniform impeccable, his voice calm and authoritative. He didn't grandstand, he simply explained the facts of the law and the right to privacy in one's own home. He then stated clearly that he would be pursuing the charges against Ms. Albright. The meeting ended with a vote of no confidence in Penelope Albright, who was swiftly removed from her position as HOA president. A new board was elected, promising a more reasonable approach to community governance. The incident, as unpleasant as it had been, had served as a wake-up call for Willow Creek. Ben's fuchsia petunias remained. He bought a bicycle rack for his garage, and he always made sure his back door was locked. His house once again felt like a sanctuary, not just because of its quiet streets but because he had fiercely defended its sanctity. He learned that day that even when off duty, the principles of law and order and the defense of one's home were inherent to who he was. Penelope Albright had learned the hard way that even an HOA president wasn't above the law, especially when she trespassed on the property of a cop. The next Saturday, Ben was back to mowing his lawn. He smiled as he pushed the mower, the scent of fresh cut grass a true balm this time. A few doors down, his new neighbor, a kindly older woman, waved at him. She had a new pot of vibrant purple petunias on her porch. He gave her a thumbs up. Life in Willow Creek was finally beginning to feel like home.